culturally responsive teaching and learning. As a bit of background information, on the next slide you'll see that we're part of REL Northwest, which is operated by Education Northwest. REL Northwest is one of 10 regional educational laboratories funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Institute for Education Sciences, IES for short. Working in a 5-state region, Alaska, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and Washington, we connect practitioners to research through applied research, development projects, studies, and technical assistance. This webinar was a request from many of our stakeholders and members of our Educator Effectiveness Working Group, so we thank them for making this webinar possible. Again, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Increasing Educator Effectiveness with Culturally Responsive Teaching and Learning. This event will provide you with increased knowledge of the evidence on the benefits of integrating cultural standards and culturally responsive education into teaching and school leadership practices. It will give you strategies for involving educators in using culturally responsive standards-based teaching, ideas for integrating culture into the classroom, and ways to incorporate cultural components into educator effectiveness and our evaluation system. But before we get into the official presentation, I'd like to briefly introduce you to the speakers who are joining us today. On the right of your screen, you will see Jerry Briscoe. Jerry is the Director of Professional Learning at CERC, Alaska's Educational Resource Center. They help districts and schools customize their unique professional development needs. In his presentation, he will tell you about Project Create, which was designed to align the Alaska cultural standards with the Alaska teacher standards. He'll also tell you about a new project called Passages, which will provide professional development learning for these cultural standards through their teacher evaluation program. Next to Jerry is Michael Lindblad. Michael is a social studies teacher at Gresham High School and is Oregon's 2015 Teacher of the Year. Since earning that title, he has also been awarded the 2016 National Education Association, Oregon Education Association, Oregon State Teacher of the Year Global Fellow. You'll learn why he has received these honors when he tells you a bit about his story and why he incorporates culture and student voice into his teaching. The photo beside Michael is Dr. Roxy Hintz. Roxy works with Milwaukee Public Schools for 21 years, with her final assignment as a culturally responsive teacher educator. When she moved to Wisconsin Department of Education, she became an educational consultant working with the state to close the achievement gap. Roxy won't be able to join us, but I've known Roxy for a couple years now, and I'll share her work with you in the opening segment, setting the stage for culturally responsive teaching and learning and how you can build a foundation for this through your own professional development efforts. Lastly, I'm Debbie Ellis. I've worked for Education Northwest for almost 19 years. My areas of focus are early childhood education and family engagement. You will learn in a few seconds how an advocate for family engagement became so passionate about culturally responsive, standards-based teaching. Several years ago, our School Family Community Partnerships team set out to determine where and how some schools and districts were creating amazing family engagement practices that were leading to student achievement. What we found were shining examples of teachers and district staff who were engaging families in very particular ways that did not look like the typical parent involvement events. We found that when educators were using culturally responsive practices within their standards-based classroom, they were engaging families and students in very dynamic ways that were leading to awesome learning opportunities. We used this information combined with a bit of research to create a resource we called Classroom to Community and Back. That was the name of the first edition of our book. So if I lovingly refer to it that way during this presentation, please forgive me. I'll be talking about culturally responsive standards-based teaching. This is the book that Roxy used as the foundation for developing professional development in Milwaukee Public Schools, and I want to share a bit about this resource with you. On this slide, you'll see a bit of the research that was garnered for culturally responsive standards-based teaching. The research behind these practices we found was fairly substantial and is getting bigger all the time. As mentioned here, over 8 studies, research shows that culturally responsive standards-based teaching can help students and districts boost student achievement and expand opportunities for parent and community engagement. In addition, there were a number of studies that suggested that low school performance may be linked, in part, to a lack of congruence between the cultures of the students' families and communities and the cultural norms embedded in the expectation, policies, procedures, and practices at school. Other research found that by the age of 8, disparities between the cultural values and patterns of communication of the home and the school may undermine children's enthusiasm for learning and their belief in their capacity to learn. In fact, one of the studies found that some students reported believing that schooling could be detrimental to their own language, culture, and identity. Lastly, we found that schools that acknowledge, accept, and teach a child's cultural heritage have significantly better success in schools. This research is in a handout that you'll find on the link on Education Northwest, where you registered for this webinar. Indy just posted it in the chat for you, so if you want to go there, you'll find copies of our PowerPoint, the handout on culturally responsive standards-based teaching, and a handout that Jerry posted for you. On this next slide, you'll see our culturally responsive standards-based teaching model. This is what we designed to show the interaction between the pieces of work and the outcomes, both short-term and long-term, that we found when doing our research. As stated earlier, that top bubble is the school, family, community partnerships and education bubble. We found a lot of great examples of these partnerships at work in our examples when we were doing the book. Some were designed that way, and some fell into this benefit by accident, but it was always a key feature of this type of teaching. On the left, the bubble that's most important for educators is the standards-based curriculum. Educators started with what they were already doing well and just added aspects of culture into their planned lessons. One interesting note about the standards-based curriculum, once it was embedded with culturally responsive teaching practices, it was really important that they always reminded students of what standards they were learning when they were doing the work. They would find that the students were so engaged and motivated by the work, they sometimes couldn't tell you what standards they were learning. Also, educators added aspects of culture into the curriculum. That's the bubble on the right. This is not like having a taco night or celebrating Black History Month. While that might add an aspect of culture into the school or the classroom, it can often be disconnected from the learning. Instead, the culturally responsive standards-based practices purposely embed these pieces into the pieces of the student's culture into their day-to-day learning. So the sweet spot we found for culturally responsive standards-based teaching is where those 3 pieces of work intersect. The benefits we found to that were the short term, teachers had a much more rigorous and challenging curriculum. By the ways they tweaked their curriculum, they had improved connections with family and community, and the students had much more engagement and motivation in their learning. And all of this led to the more long-term benefit of student achievement and youth success. Research by Ginsberg and Wolkowski found, as we found, that culturally responsive teaching addressed the needs of the students by improving motivation and engagement. When youth, family, and community culture were included in the classroom, students felt a sense of belonging, saw a purpose in learning, and were motivated to do well. And like I said, I'm so passionate about this because it also increased the relationships between families, communities, and schools. This slide gives you a definition about culture. Culture is a way of life as it relates to the socially transmitted habits, customs, traditions, and beliefs of a particular group of people at a particular time. It includes the behaviors, actions, practices, attitudes, norms, values, communication styles, language, etiquette, spirituality, concepts of health and healing, beliefs, and institutions of racial, ethnic, and religious or social groups. Other things that are important to remember is that we all have a culture, sometimes more than one culture in one body. Cultures are also complex. They're dynamic and ever-changing. What we may have as our culture today may be something totally different tomorrow based on the circumstances of our life. And our cultures, our values, beliefs, people, places, history, stories, and traditions are what moves and motivates us. Thus, our culture can be central to understanding each other and promoting a respectful school environment. But our cultural definition, from classroom to community and back, culturally responsive standards-based teaching, is this: all aspects of a student's life that can engage and motivate them to learn and do their best work, including but not limited to their family and home culture, community culture, youth culture, and pop culture. For a moment, I want to just share briefly with you the Alaska standards that Jerry will talk about more, just because they fit so nicely in the definitions and the work that we're trying to do with culturally responsive standards-based teaching. They talk about things like cultural connections, authentic local resources, community connections, home connections, and high unbiased expectations. They say that culturally responsive educators incorporate local ways of knowing and teaching into their work. They use the local environment and community resources on a regular basis to link what they are teaching to the everyday lives of the students. They have educators participating in community events and activities in appropriate and supportive ways. Culturally responsive educators work closely with parents to achieve high levels of complementary educational expectations between the home and the school. And they recognize the full educational potential of each student and provide the challenges necessary for them to achieve that potential. All of those basic pieces of information are here to lead us to the continuum of options and opportunities that move from the less complex to the more complex. In our work, we found that on the less complex side, you could do such actions as incorporating culturally relevant materials into the environment, or engaging students in conversation about their home, family, or community. On the more complex side, educators could create interdisciplinary activities, such as one of the examples in our book called The Wild Ride, where 3 teachers teamed together to create math, language arts, and science lessons around a roller coaster. That's an example of youth culture. To statewide efforts, such as Indiana's 4th grade Common Core curriculum built around the Indy 500, which is an example of community culture. You can read any of these stories in the resource that we shared with you online. It is this resource and this foundation that Roxy used to create her district-wide professional development in Milwaukee Public Schools. So I'll first share a little portrait about Milwaukee with you. It's the largest school district in Wisconsin and one of the largest in the U.S. In the 2013-2014 school years, they served 78,502 students in 165 schools. Their student population is about 85% students of color, while their educator population is 85 to 90% white. It's this disconnect between the educator and student populations and the outcomes that students were getting in the district or were not getting in the district that made them create a pilot professional development project for all teachers and administrators in Milwaukee Public Schools. The district-wide professional development was born. The focus of the pilot was around culturally responsive teaching as well as Common Core training support. They piloted their professional development in 13 schools. They started with those that were identified as GE schools, which meant they were funded largely by General Electric. Then they moved this professional development into the entire district. To do this work, the district hired 2 culturally responsive teacher leaders, Roxy and Michelle, to champion this effort. The next slide shows that the research and strategies behind culturally responsive standards-based teaching became the foundation of their work and almost half of their professional development program. The other half of the program focused on personal growth and development around race, culture, and beliefs. They felt they had to address race, biases, institutional racism, all the things that had become for them an influence on how their teachers and administrators were responding to, interacting with, and teaching their children. They felt they couldn't teach one of these aspects of this work without the other. So just a little piece of culturally responsive teaching, a definition here. The second focus of their work, which was on the professional growth and development, is also really a main focus of culturally responsive standards-based teaching. First, culturally responsive standards-based teaching infuses family customs as well as community culture and expectations throughout the teaching and learning environment. By providing instruction in a context meaningful to students and in a way that values their culture, knowledge, and experiences, culturally responsive teaching fosters the student engagement and motivation. But the piece that has to do with professional growth and development and personal beliefs is that culturally responsive teaching is built on a foundation of knowledge and understanding of your own and your students' family and community culture, which is critical to the process of teaching and learning. Becoming culturally responsive is an ongoing process that evolves as we learn about ourselves, our world, and other cultures. To become culturally responsive, we first have to look at our own culture, especially if we're part of our country's dominant culture. We have to have an open mind to what we don't understand and be ready to learn new ways of looking at and doing things. The other half of the professional development centered around the essential elements for classroom or culturally responsive standards-based teaching. First, the teaching has to be student-centered. Culturally responsive standards-based practices promote authentic learning that is relevant and meaningful to students and connects learning in the school to what the students know and are learning outside the classroom. The students' lives, interests, families, communities, and cultures are the basis for what is taught, and they are involved in planning what they will learn and how they will learn it. The social, emotional, and cognitive strengths and needs of the students are recognized by their teachers and reflected in individualized learning plans that are connected to goals and standards. And the instruction is built on the students' personal and cultural strengths. CRSB teaching is also transformational. The practices can transform teaching and learning by valuing and building on the knowledge all students bring to class. The role of the teacher is first transformed from instructor to facilitator by allowing students' experiences, perspectives, and interests to help shape the curriculum. The curriculum is transformed as the subject matter is examined from many different perspectives in ways that promote growth and discovery. And the participants' points of view are transformed as they begin to value and respect things and people that they may not have valued or respected before. The practices are also connected and integrated. Culturally responsive standards-based teaching should not be an add-on or a separate activity, but rather an approach that is connected and integrated with what is happening in the rest of the classroom and school community. The teaching is connected and integrated when learning is contextualized and built on what students already know. Interdisciplinary work is used to illustrate the relationships among different subjects and their applicability, and the work encourages students and teachers to connect with other students, teachers, administrators, family, and community members. It fosters critical thinking. It creates opportunities for students to build critical thinking skills such as decision-making, logical inquiry, reasoning, artistic creation, and problem-solving by using these skills in real-life situations and understanding how to apply them in other contexts. It also incorporates assessment and reflection. A variety of authentic assessment measures are used by both the teacher and student to monitor progress throughout the year and to make mid-course adjustments. In addition, students and teachers develop and pose rich questions to reflect critically on lessons learned. As students and teachers practice assessment and reflection, both groups better understand their own teaching and learning styles and make academic, personal, and cultural connections. Lastly, and most importantly, it builds relationships and community. When you recognize family and community members' knowledge and experiences as strengths that are valuable to a child's education, you are valued and respected in turn by students, staff, families, and community members. Culturally responsive standards-based teaching fosters partnerships between family and community members when they are reminded that they have something to offer the school and that they can have a significant positive impact on the quality of their child's education. Culturally responsive standards-based teaching builds relationships between individuals and among groups of people. when they learn what others have to contribute. They learn to rely on each other, work together on concrete tasks that can take advantage of their collective and individual assets, and create promising futures for youth in the community. The process that Milwaukee Public Schools took for the professional development is as follows. They trained all the teachers and administrators in the pilot schools. The teachers also received coaching and individual technical assistance to support their teaching in the classroom. Thus, it was fully integrated into their work, not an add-on. They also were encouraged to share their work. They would regularly hold gallery walks where teachers would display student work with description of the Common Core standards and essential elements used. Roxy and Michelle did this work in the district for 2 years, and the district is still continuing to do it now. Roxy is contracted to train over 500 teachers next week, focusing on 3 of the 6 elements. So that is about all I have for the background of culturally responsive, standards-based teaching and the work that Roxy did in Milwaukee Public Schools. This slide shows the contact information for Roxy, who's willing to share more information with you about how this is done. Before I hand it off to Michael, though, were there any questions or comments that I needed to address? Okay, then. With that, I would like to introduce everybody to Michael Lindblad, who will share his journey into equity.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for taking your afternoon to be a part of this team and do what's best for students across America. What I'm so excited about is we represent several regions. It was outstanding to hear the work that Roxy's doing. 500 teachers to train next week. That's incredible. And the work that's being done across in the different regions is what we want to do in Oregon and what we want to do in my school district. And so thank you to Debbie for that presentation. I love the focus on culture because we want to build our student culture, we want to build our community cultures, and we want to build and inspire our staffs to connect to those cultures on a consistent basis and be a model for that in all of our states. So I think it's outstanding that we're working together with several different regions. In addition, I'm really excited to hear from Jerry today and all the work that he has done in Alaska. To know that there's 127 different languages in Alaska shows what a model that can be for the United States and also for our district and our state here in Oregon. So thank you to everyone involved for taking your time. And just to go off of Debbie's theme, I wanted to articulate a little bit about my own culture, some mentors that were influential in my building of my culture and how I became a teacher, which leads me to my culturally responsive teaching practices that I use today and I'm trying to engage students with all the time. I teach in Gresham High School in Portland, near Portland, Oregon, right in between Mount Hood and the Willamette River, and that's where I do that. I want to start off in 1980 and talk to you about some key events that happened in my life that allowed me to have a mentor like my grandfather who helped me believe in equity from a very young age. In 1980, when my parents separated, I went to move in with my grandparents, and my grandparents were both immigrants. They spoke multiple languages in the house, and my grandfather, who was a World War II veteran, Air Force captain, sat me down at the dining room table and said, you better bring a piece of paper and a pen. There's going to be some rules we're going to go over for you living in this house. One of the first rules was that we were going to learn multiple languages because the legacies and cultures of immigrants from everywhere mattered, and it was important to learn other languages. And even though it was very difficult for me to learn Arabic that he was trying to teach me every night, I did learn Spanish pretty well, and he felt like those languages were going to be a very important part of the future of Oregon. And if you look at Oregon demographically, it really has changed massively in the last several decades. For instance, our Latino and Hispanic population has completely taken off, and we have Eastern European populations. I have 27 languages in my particular school in the Gresham Barlow School District, and I thought that was very diverse until I met Jerry and learned of what he's working with in Anchorage. My grandfather's second rule was that I was going to bring back a student from the grade school from a different ethnicity or culture just about every single week. And I didn't really know why I needed to do this. He told me that they could all drink root beer floats, but they had to be A&W, and that every person has dignity. But if my grandfather was here today, I'd thank him several times for that. And I have to thank my grandmother as well, because she had a little bell that she used, and said, well, your grandfather is thinking you're going to do homework for several hours, but I'm going to let you go out and play occasionally. And when I ring this bell, you run like the wind and get up here and sit down when he comes in from work. Having those mentors in my life really helped me develop a lens of equity from a very young age that not only should other cultures be embraced, but we should actively be learning about other cultures and using that to improve our own lives. In staying with my grandparents and learning those things, I went to the Park Grove School District in Portland, and I transferred my junior year to Madison High School, which is in the inner city, because my family did not have a lot of money. We wanted to get a chance to play for an incredible teacher and coach to create some scholarship money. That teacher and coach was an incredible mentor in my life, not just in high school, but later on when I became a teacher. His name is Dave Gasser. He's the winningest coach in Oregon history. He had us get up and go to practice at 4 o'clock in the morning, but he was also an amazing teacher, and he helped create a baseball scholarship for me to attend Linfield College. So I learned very early in my life from my grandparents and my experience in an inner city school with multiple ethnicities and cultures that diversity matters and everyone has a value, and I took that with me as I went on to college. Next slide, please. I was lucky enough to go to Linfield College, which is an incredible school in McMinnville. It's kind of in the Oregon wine country around the Willamette Valley. And I arrived there in 1991 on a baseball scholarship thinking I was going to go there and become a professional baseball player. And I did really well in baseball, but my sophomore year, my mother decided that I was very narrow-focused in my life, and she's a very dedicated woman that helped me achieve what I have today. And she called the college baseball coach and said, listen, I want my son to go on an international study abroad. I know that's against the rules for scholarship athletes, but I want you to change the rules because he's too focused on baseball and his GPA and he needs to expand his comfort zone. And I know a lot of you educational leaders that are here today, we're working hard to do that for all of our students, to give them international experiences, and if we can't take them places, to bring cultures into the school and be exposed to programs like the one that we're going through right now. So I got called into my coach's office, and the first thing he said is, your mother called me, and there was this pause of a little bit of silence, and I was really worried because that doesn't typically happen at college, and I was kind of embarrassed, and he said, you know, she's a tough negotiator, and it sounds like you're going to go on study abroad, but there'll be some conditioning stipulations when you go. So off I went to Nottingham, England, and went through Western Europe. And probably the biggest impact I had was when I had a chance to go to North Africa. We had a student from Tunisia that was part of our international program in Nottingham, and he had invited us to come down to Tunisia. I didn't think he would ever anticipate that we would, but 4 of us went down there, and we went through the Sahara Desert, went through a very intense international experience, and we were invited to his house for dinner. And I showed this picture of the street because it still reminds me of what it was like after growing up in America to go to the streets of Tunisia, see animals walking through, see a marketplace, and get invited into this house that was not quite like my house, and it was much smaller, and basically in the size of my classroom, the entire house was going on, and we ate dinner, we sat on the floor, and I really remembered a lot. This is not like and this is an international experience, and maybe my mother was right that I needed to expand my horizon just like I'm trying to do for my students. I was really humbled by this travel experience, and the one other thing I wanted to include from the study abroad program in Nottingham was our teacher, Peta, walked into a room with 60 international students and 40 students from the United States, and she said, okay, all you Yankees, we're going to go ahead and see how you do on your own geography exam from the United States, and all you international pilgrims, you're going to take the same test as well, and we're going to check your geographic awareness. And all the Americans instantly looked at each other and kind of gave each other a look of, oh my gosh, are we going to have to identify all these states? As you can anticipate, as most of you with international backgrounds, the international students scored 90% on that exam or higher, and most of us Americans scored between 60 and 30%. And this was our own country. And that really made me think between an international experience in Tunisia and between this awareness that I wanted to change the world and I wanted to increase awareness inside the United States about cultures. So go ahead and take, 20 seconds right now and see how would you do on this map exam today if you took it out of 50 states. And I'll give you 20 seconds and then we'll go ahead and resume. Okay, so I wanted to give you that short little opportunity and kind of break the day up a little bit and give you a chance to look at American geography so you could think about that experience and how it impacted me. Next slide, please. When I got back from studying abroad, I knew I wanted to teach, and I enrolled in a program in Lewis and Clark, very similar, not very far off from where Education Northwest is downtown. And just like Debbie, who's been with Education Northwest for 19 years, I've actually taught for 19 years myself. I was lucky enough to get hired at Lake Ridge High School, thus the L is the symbol of that community. It's the most affluent school district in our state. It's a very supportive district, and I was able to develop a global studies curriculum based off of my travels. And I really felt at the end of the third year there that I needed to maximize my cultural competency more. I wanted to be a more culturally responsive teacher, and I wanted to really cement my learning of Spanish just like my grandfather always wanted me to do. And I started feeling a need to branch out a little bit and go experience another culture, and that's why I went to Machu Picchu in Peru, and I decided to live there for 1 year to get away from mainstream culture in the United States and also be able to speak Spanish. And those of you that, I know that this group speaks multiple languages, those of you that speak another language know that you can learn about it in school, but until you need to eat, until you need to change your money, until you need to go see Inca ruins, you don't get a chance to use it as much. So I learned Spanish in Peru and went with my anthropologist from Linfield and lived down there for a year. It was a fabulous experience, and I'll get to actually go back this year as a global fellow and visit schools, and I'm really excited for that. And after that experience, I chose Gresham High School because of the high rates of poverty and the incredible different ethnicities that we have an opportunity every day that can engage me. I have students from Egypt, I have students from Africa, I have students from sub-Saharan Africa, Europe, all around the world there every day, and it really enriches my life. Next slide, please. One of the other things that was a big factor in my journey into equity and my desire to put in more culture into the curriculum, into standards-based curriculum around geography and world history standards, was reading Jonathan Kozlow's book, Savage Inequalities, when I was at Lewis and Clark. And combined with the international experiences I had gone through to change my comfort zone and to give me new perspectives, there's a part of this book where Jonathan Kozlow says that nothing matters more than a teacher, even in the most impoverished environments that are against all sorts of challenges, which we've experienced in Oregon since 2008 in the recession with high class numbers. If you have a caring individual in the classroom that really matters, every student matters, and that we teach to the student's culture, that can make a huge difference. And for all of you administrators on the line as well, I know that that's also very important in a school to provide that support for someone that cares about the teachers and the students. In addition to Savage Inequalities by Jonathan Kozlow, Barry Lopez wrote a book about the literature of place. And I think, as Debbie articulated so well about the power of culture and needing to meet students where they're at culturally and respect their cultures, including our own personal journeys, I really felt like after reading Barry Lopez's piece, and he's an Oregon author that tends to write about a lot of local geographic places, that we could use a place paper in my new school with so many different ethnicities to honor where all these students came from and let them, before anything else happens in a class, talk about the power of their place in their life. Next slide, please. So we designed this place paper assignment where every student can talk about their most powerful place in their life, and they can describe their environment around it. As Debbie articulated, the family engagement piece is so important, and this gives families even an opportunity to get involved in the place assignment when people talk about their personal or family connections. And it's also able to be used in professional trainings with adults. I've used this across the state of Oregon in different places to start people off, even in a room, to build community, and people talk about the power of their places and how it represents them culturally or ethnically, and it can really build community. I use this every year to start off the class, and we all talk about our places, and with class numbers at 45 or 47 sometimes, it really helps me even identify who my students are by the powerful places that they come from. And to be honest, I always bring in food, so we share our place papers, and we really enjoy the power of all the different continents we're from and how a certain cultural place can be very important to one person and another person might not think so, but they get to value each other in the reading of the place papers. This is my grandfather's favorite place in the Prineville Reservoir in the Oregon Mountain Desert, about 2 hours beyond Mount Hood of the Cascade Mountains. Next slide, please. So the place paper is a great way, and you can use it with geography standards, you can use it with English standards. It's a great way to introduce things and get your class community culture built. And one thing I realized when I went to Gresham High School is one of the most important things for students is that they are valued and that they are heard and that they have a mentor in the school that believes in them. And in 2001, when I arrived at Gresham, this student who's on the far right here, her name is Martha Almendarez, who is an immigrant from El Salvador, came up to me in very broken English and said, Mr. Lindblad, what can we do about the earthquake in El Salvador? And I told her, Martha, even though I didn't know what I was going to do as a young teacher, I didn't tell her that. I said, we're going to support you. We're going to figure out a way to help the people of El Salvador. And that's when Martha became empowered. She, with an exchange student from Brazil, raised over $2,000 through Mercy Corps for that first humanitarian project. And that convinced me, number one, part of culturally responsive teaching is really believing in students, that they can do anything in their life, and that even immigrant students with limited English skills can do amazing things because of the experiences and sacrifices their families have gone through, and that we could take this project and apply it to every single class. Now it's grown into a club at the school. Every single one of my classes do it, and the students generate the thinking around the project. They're the ones that come up with where they want to help out, how they want to raise awareness, how they want to raise funds. So I honored Martha actually at the United Way Champions for Change dinner, along with my first Latino student teacher and a student on the far left, Yanira Romero, who diversified our IB program and taught us that anyone can take a college-level class. Next slide, please. The humanitarian project is a way to engage community. And I know that a lot of educators and a lot of administrators and leaders that are involved in this webinar today are really busy people, which is why I really appreciate you being here. And one of the things that happens is we tend to go into our schools and sometimes take the same road in and maybe the same road out and not have a chance to even get around in our own community. And I really felt like this would be a way that we can engage the community. The first superintendent I had in the Gresham Barlow School District, John Miner, actually put the new teachers on a bus and took us all around the community so we could find out who we were teaching. And that was a goal that I had in this class I taught at Lewis and Clark, Engaging the Community, to have everyone go out in their communities, survey them, and think about where could be some common meeting spots for students, staff, and community members. In the humanitarian project, the students engage the community by going out, dressing up, coming up with a flyer, and coming up with a target area that they want to help out, whether it be the homeless in downtown Portland, whether it be a Hurricane Sandy in New Jersey, or the catastrophe in Japan or Haiti over the years. We can really work on equity by learning about other cultures, relating those to social studies or English standards and career-related learning skills while we're engaging the community, and they go out and communicate this to the businesses in there. We have worked with over 100 businesses, and now I probably go eat lunch at several of those places. We have restaurants that dedicate whole evenings to our students or our student groups, and we have worked with various different humanitarian organizations, Red Cross, Mercy Corps. Partners in Health is one of my favorites because it's from Paul Farmer, who's the subject of a book, Mountains Beyond Mountains, that we actually read to inspire the students on what a humanitarian is. And a really good use for this project is that a lot of students put this on their resumes, that they're involved and do these incredible things that they created. And we've had students get jobs in the community. We've had them actually go on to college and get scholarships. But they're learning about culture and they're learning about how to work with each other. And this is not social studies out of a textbook. This is social studies live in our communities with our families. And, of course, the families get involved because they want to help the students with their projects. Next slide, please. Another thing that I wanted to point out in this webinar today is that organizations like Education Northwest and the United Way and Metropolitan Family Services are so crucial for providing an extra web in a school community to provide mentors for people even after school that are struggling. One of my first principles, put up a sheet of paper all across the gymnasium, and she had every teacher go around and sign their name next to the student if they knew them. And there were 73 students in a school of 1,700 that no one knew. And this was like 10 years ago. And it really made us think, how can we become better? Because we know that studies indicate that a student needs one mentor in a building, and that can inspire them to come every day. And that's why we started putting a lot of different things in place. And we have a Sun School who provides all sorts of training after school, credit recovery, and empowerment classes, including different empowerment groups for ethnic groups, you know, African American groups, Native American groups, and different Latino and Latina empowerment groups. And it's really been an amazing process to watch our Sun coordinator, Linda Q, do that. And I know all of you in your schools have extra support services. Mobilizing those services and having them articulate a plan with each other is crucial to moving our equity efforts forward and being culturally responsive teachers. And what we're going to hear from Jerry coming up soon is all the specific standards that Debbie already articulated and showed us are great roadmaps for teachers to use and that I try and use every day. I'm actually going to try and implement some of those standards in our own school district because I think they're so outstanding and give teachers a guide and inspiration of how to become more culturally responsive. Next slide, please.
Michael, we can't hear you. Oh, great. There you are.
Yes. I'm still here. I was just waiting for the next slide to come up.
It should be up now.
So to continue and to summarize with several of the things that we've gone over, the very last slide, which I see now coming up on my computer, I'm sorry about the delay there, is we really have to embrace our students where they're at in their culture. We have to use culturally responsive teaching practices. The place paper and the humanitarian project are specific ways to engage the community and the students and to get them really excited about education, and then standards can be incorporated in there. In 2013, you're looking at a picture of some twin babies of mine that I now have that I didn't anticipate I'd be having. I went to celebrate with my wife to Hawaii because we've raised 3 daughters that we weren't going to have any more kids. Well, things can change like they do in education and in classroom settings every day. And the birth of my twins coincided with me lucky enough to winning these teaching awards, the Social Studies Teacher of the Year, the Oregon State Teacher of the Year. And I had a chance to meet President Obama. And when I met Obama, I told him that I was proud of him, that he set a model for equity himself by becoming the first non-white president that we've ever had, and I believe that we're next in line for a woman or even other options that we could be having. So I'm really lucky to be a part of this, and I want to use this opportunity in my life that I've been given to really connect.
Hello, Michael. We've lost your audio again. Thank you, Michael. We've lost your audio, and we'll let you give some closing comments again at the end if you would like. We will move forward now with our next presenter, Jerry. He's going to speak to us about the Alaska Cultural Standards for Educators. Go ahead, Jerry.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. I'm going to say hello to you in Alutiiq, which is Chamai. So excited and honored to be with you all today. After Michael's inspirational presentation and hearing things that he mentioned like giving students hope and engaging them, student voice, and then also concepts that he spoke about growth mindset and things that they're doing at Gresham, I wanted to bring to you now a different perspective, one of being intentional about designing and planning effective culturally responsive strategies into your instruction, and then measuring the effectiveness of those strategies to identify areas of growth and strength for a teacher. And I also want to give thanks to Debbie for her great presentation earlier. I want to just mention that much of the research that Debbie shared is explicitly evident in our standards and the project that I will be sharing with you today. So here you see before you North America's tallest peak, and Denali just got its old name back. The name Denali is derived from Koyukon, which is one of 11 Athabascan languages in Alaska, and it means the tall one. Restoring the mountain's native name was an issue that many Alaskans were truly passionate about. What's important now is that people may begin to learn more about the Athabascan system of naming places and geographical structures, because their rule-driven naming system is highly functional and it's designed to make travel in the region more intuitive. So for instance, a river, its tributaries, and the river mouth all have a part of their names in common so that people know the different bodies are related to one another. What I've just given you is an example of why cultural responsiveness related to a person's place that Michael was talking about is so important. So in our project, Project Create, it's important in that it helps our educators understand that connecting content knowledge with students' backgrounds, interests, and cultures will also help students become more intuitive in applying their new knowledge. So here are the major chunks that I will cover with you in our short time together today. First of all, what is Project Create? The mission, the journey, our outcome, and our next highly anticipated next steps. Next slide, please. So as Michael introduced to you the concept of place, our place is a very large geographic region. As you can see on this map, the relative size of Alaska to the lower 48 is quite impressive. There are 54 school districts in the state, with many of them covering areas that are the size of some states in the entire lower 48, with access to those villages and schools only by plane, boat, or snow machines up the frozen rivers in the winter. Combine that with the fact that the population in Alaska is sparse. The total population of Alaska is only nearly 700,000 people, with approximately half that amount living in the general area of Anchorage. This makes the use of our resources of time, space, distance, and communication extremely challenging. As Michael mentioned, there are approximately 100 languages spoken in just the Anchorage School District alone, a district of 50,000 students. A district that also now has the 3 most diverse high schools in the entire nation, and the most diverse neighborhood in the nation, even more diverse than the Bronx neighborhood in New York. Next slide, please. So our mission. In Alaska's pursuit of a high-quality education for all students, educators are guided by 3 sets of student achievement and school quality standards. As you can see, there are the performance standards that guides the performance of teachers, the content standards that defines what students should know and do, and then quality school standards, which are the specific requirements for school accreditation. All of these generally apply to all schools and students throughout the state. They do not, however, specifically address the unique cultural context of Alaska schools, which serves a large number of Alaska Native students. Next slide, please. Because of this need, we had a need to address the unique cultural context of Alaska schools and its students, which in the rural, remote areas are largely Alaska Native. These 4 needs, which are examining how educators practice and promote the cultural well-being of their students, how do they help students become responsible, capable, and whole human beings, and how do we connect for students what they experience in school and their lives out of school in real-world contexts, and how is it that we develop culturally healthy students and communities? These 4 needs helped drive the development and the creation of the Alaska Cultural Standards for Educators, along with all of the research that Debbie showed us earlier. This slide represents the vision. You can go ahead and click on through there. I thought I had taken those off. I'm sorry about the animation. This slide represents the vision of what the standards will achieve as outcomes for the curriculum, for the teachers, for the students, and for the communities. So the shifting of the focus from teaching and learning about cultural heritage as another subject to now teaching and learning through the local culture and the world views, that has become and been the goal of the Alaska Standards for Culturally Responsive Schools since their beginning. Next slide, please. So let me talk about the beginning. On this slide, I want to bring attention to a website address at the top of the page, which you should all write down and take note of. And I want to dedicate all of our efforts today to all of the Alaska Native educators and supporting organizations who came before us and made a trail for us to follow. First, we acknowledge a comprehensive body of work that was produced by the Alaska Rural Systemic Initiative. As a partner with the Rural Systemic Initiative, the Alaska Native Knowledge Network became a resource for compiling and exchanging information that was related to Alaska Native knowledge systems and ways of knowing. This slide is just one example from their website that shows resources that are available. The one at the top of the second column, the book you see there, was the first resource that began to set in motion this idea of establishing a set of standards for culturally responsive teachers, and it was first published in 1998. Next slide. You'll also see a website address here to our State Department of Education, which you can go to and download the entire document that you see here. But what I want to say, from 1998, when the original document was created, until this document that you see now in front of you, this was produced in May of 2012. The original document from 1998 was revised, and this new document was approved officially by the State Board of Education as a guide to districts and schools that they should use in helping assess their school and in helping teachers to plan ways to become more effective in culturally responsive practices. This document, however, in its revision, was not intended for nor written for teacher evaluation or comparison of teacher effectiveness, as stated in the preface of this document. But later in December of 2012, the State Board of Education again officially adopted this document and the cultural standards in it to become a required part of teacher and administrator evaluation. So from the initial creation of the standards to now becoming a required part of teacher and administrator evaluation, it was 14 years. However, since this document was not written for evaluation, we now have a new need. This posed the need to now develop some measurable indicators and behaviors for teachers that could be used to support teacher growth and development, as well as for accountability purposes of measuring teacher effectiveness. Next slide, please. This graphic, taken from the Alaska Department of Education website, depicts the inclusion of the cultural standards and the requirement that they would be used, as Debbie mentioned in her presentation, as a filter or a lens through which all of the professional standards would be evaluated. You can notice that in the center of this graphic that the cultural standards is written in a vertical fashion, that all of the Alaska professional standards on the left-hand side of it would flow through the cultural standards as a new filter. This graphic in particular is for teachers. However, there is a companion one for administrators as well. The state also gave guidance in new regulations that the Alaska professional standards and cultural standards would be evaluated using approved research-based models. The pre-approved ones that the state acknowledged and gave for choices were Danielson's model, Marzano's model, and the Center on Ed Leadership model out of the University of Washington. Inherent is the belief that all evaluation frameworks would then incorporate, embed, or infuse the cultural standards into district evaluation models or frameworks, and that the cultural standards would not be measured or evaluated as a set of standalone standards within their own silo. They would be connected and integrated, as Debbie alluded to earlier, and tied also to other research-based pedagogical models of instruction. Next slide, please. So now we have the journey. This slide represents something very specific, again, to the place of Alaska. The children of Nome in January of 1925 were dying. They were infected with diphtheria, and they wheezed and gasped for air, and every day they brought a new case of the lethal respiratory disease. Nome's only physician, Dr. Curtis Welch, feared that an epidemic would put the entire village of 1,400 at risk, and he ordered a quarantine but knew that only an antitoxin serum could ward off the fast-spreading disease. So a daring sled dog relay through the savage Alaskan winter delivered life-saving medicine to the remote village of Nome. That is now an event that's commemorated every March by the Iditarod Trail Sled Dog Race. It has now become known as the last great race on this planet. The race is, of course, the Iditarod, and though it doesn't have a long official history as a sporting event, dog sledding does have a lengthy history in Alaska. The race, the journey, is also a part of our place. So in Project Create, in many ways, we have also embarked on a life-saving journey. We feel that our journey of bringing culturally responsive knowledge to educators to help them grow and improve their skills and connecting the content knowledge that they're bringing to kids through many different world views that are represented here will also help save our children. Next slide, please. Project Create, first of all, is the project that I'm going to describe to you, but before I do that, I want to give thanks to my many colleagues, many that I will not name because I can't remember all of them at the moment, but three in particular: Dan Henry, Martha Gould Lee, and Marianne Dobbs. They are the three that joined with me in this epic journey to build this project to help the teachers of Alaska. CERC, the organization that I work for, Southeast Regional Resource Center, Alaska's only educational resource center, received a competitive Alaska Native Education Program grant in 2012 by the U.S. Department of Education. The purpose of Project Create was to develop a teacher evaluation model that demonstrated the ideal of measuring teacher effectiveness using a research-based model or framework, but while at the same time embedding and infusing the cultural standards within that research-based model. Our partner was Bering Strait School District, which I might mention, one school district, our partner, is the size of the whole state of Minnesota. And our other partner was the Alaska Native Educators Association. Since Bering Strait had chosen the Marzano model of teacher evaluation, that was the research-based framework that we used in our initial development of these standards. Next slide, please. The grant had 5 specific elements. The first 4 elements that you see listed here have been completed. Element 5 is now at the graphic designer and will soon be released on our website. I want to spend time now with you to go into elements 2 and 3 and show you more about our journey. We're going to start first with element 3 because it had to occur before the alignment of element 2 could be done. Go ahead and click through there. Thank you. When we started developing what indicators would be needed, we asked the question, what teacher behaviors would you want to see from a culturally responsive educator? And we did a lot of research and digging. We found that all of the state-approved research-based models, those that I mentioned, Danielson, Marzano, and the Center on Ed Leadership, covered basically the same 8 teacher practices. Those are planning, new content, deepening content, applying the content, a classroom environment, student engagement, professionalism, and of course reflecting on their teaching. So we started there. These were also the behaviors that were addressed in the Alaska Professional Standards. So our question is, what would these look like through a cultural lens? Next slide, please. We built this working template to answer that question, to create and establish all of the working parts and pieces that we envisioned in the final document. It evolved as we moved into the process, as you will see in a few slides from now. Remember that our partner, Bering Strait, had chosen the Marzano model, so you may see some familiarity in this template with that model. We actually began our first step of alignment with the building of this template. And so if you look across the middle of the template, you can see those 8 behaviors of planning and new content and deepening content and applying content. And below each of those, you'll see the letters AK, which means Alaska, and then the professional standards of Alaska and how we aligned those 8 behaviors to the professional standards. Next slide, please. Here is that same example of how that template looked completed. But remember, it was just after the first step in our journey to create culturally embedded standards and indicators into an existing research-based framework. You'll see on this slide, cultural standard A is that culturally responsive educators incorporate local ways of knowing and teaching in their work. Again, this example at this point on our journey had not gone through any vetting for reliability and validity, nor had we done any field testing at this point. This was literally the very first product of our very first attempts. Next slide, please. A common language or model of instruction provides a framework for a way to talk about instruction that is shared by everyone in the state or at the district or school level. And while the focus on teacher effectiveness has to be centered on improving student learning, a complex evaluation system has to also focus on improving the expertise of the teachers across the entire system and provide clear ways for teachers to improve their instruction. Knowing that, we knew that a well-articulated knowledge base and a common language was a prerequisite for developing any of the standards and indicators and evidences that we were about to create. So we continually and consistently built a common language for our work with 12 cultural consultants whom we hired on a contractual basis to come in and work with us in developing the evidences that you're about to see. This slide shows just a few of the words and the concepts that we were shaping and framing and reframing as we developed the cultural indicators and evidences through that lens, and also considering that we were now developing things that could measure teacher effectiveness for the purpose of growth and improvement. Next slide, please. After we designed the working template, we created vetting questions for each of the 8 teacher domains and student evidences. This took time. We looked up words like validity and reliability and vetting as they related to our work, and it helped our team be more accurate in our descriptions and directions with the cultural consultants that we were working with. We took great care to explain to our consultants that vetting means to verify and check for accuracy and authenticity and validity and reliability. And since our work was for the purpose of evaluation and measuring a teacher's effectiveness against the cultural standards, we definitely wanted our work to be all of those things. So we ended up having 4 rounds of vetting, with each round actually being vetted again by our team. So first, we vetted the writers, the creators, the consultants, vetted their own work first and sent it back to us. Then we sent it out to another consultant, and they vetted it and sent it back to us. And then we sent it out to another consultant, and they vetted it and sent it back to us. Finally, in the end, we took all of the vetting feedback and suggestions, and we sent it back to the original writer, the original consultant, for their final look at it, considering all of the suggestions that had been given. And then once again, it was sent back to us. Next slide, please. Element 2 of the grant was to align the cultural standards with the Alaska Teacher Standards and the Marzano Evaluation Model, since that was the instruction that the Alaska State Department of Education had given guidance to us for in their regulations. Just to let you know, in the state, most districts have chosen the Danielson and Marzano models, but there are a handful that have chosen the Center on Ed Leadership, or they have actually created their own model, which has then been vetted and approved by our State Department. This slide shows a markup of Marzano's model, which he calls the learning map. He calls this his learning map. So on this slide, you'll see Domain 1 of Marzano's model and all of the observable classroom strategies and behaviors. I want to bring your attention first to the blue section on the far left-hand side called Routines. Under that title, Routines, you will see Marzano's elements in the first column. The second column shows the cultural elements or the cultural indicators we developed and which ones we aligned them to of his map. Then the third column shows the Alaska Teacher Standards, and the number of the professional teacher standards also align to the cultural and Marzano's map. This alignment to the learning map, however, could not be completed until we had first developed and created all of the indicators for the cultural standards and the accompanying teacher and student evidences that would define those. Next slide, please. So now we have the outcome. You're familiar with this, the Aurora Borealis, or the Northern Lights. This has intrigued people from ancient times and still does today. The Eskimos and Indians of North America have many stories to explain them. Here's just a few names given to them by Native people. Evil Thing, Omen of War, Dancing Spirits, Game of Ball, Spirits of Children, Fires in the North, Stew Pots, Creator, Reminder. These are all very vast and different names with different perspectives, but they have one thing in common. They all see the Northern Lights as an outcome of some event or story or activity. Also remember that the Northern Lights are different colors, and you see the different colors from different latitudes on this earth. You will see different variations according to where you are standing. So much like in education, maybe we have all seen the same color for too long, and we need to change our position to see all the different variations of color. We see Project Create that same way. Project Create will be viewed and was created to be used and viewed in a way that remains unique to the local culture of the students that are in each and every teacher's classroom. They have been created to be responsive to local place and culture and not directed to any one particular people group or place. Next slide, please. The colors represented at the top are much like the different variations of color of the Northern Lights. Here is our outcome. This is our Northern Light. We call this the cultural map. It's similar to Marzano's learning map, but represented on this chart, you will see the cultural standards and the indicators for each one listed in the column below. Those 16 indicators were part of the work that the cultural consultants and my team helped create and develop over the last 3 years. It may be too small for you to see on this slide, but you'll notice that there is a red asterisk next to some of the indicators. This means that those indicators are observable in the classroom, while the other indicators without the asterisk are more effectively evidenced by either artifacts or direct conversations with the teacher. Next slide, please. Now I want to unpack a cultural standard for you a little bit to show you what occurred in the development and creation of our work. This is a draft copy of our final product. The document is currently at the graphic designer and will very soon, probably within this week, be a downloadable link on our website that I will tell you about in a few slides. Let's start with what we were given first by our state. The state gave us the standard itself. A, culturally responsive educators incorporate local ways of knowing and teaching in their work. We knew that to start unpacking meaning of the standard, we would need to have a brief description of what the standard's intent and purpose was, with some additional clarification of terms, again going back to building the common language of instruction. So we built a description of each standard, which is what you see right below that standard. Next, following Marzano's model, since that was what Bering Strait, our partner, had chosen, we developed a focus statement for the standard that would capture or highlight the emphasis of what the key concepts or constructs the teacher would be expected to do. Also following Marzano's template, we created a desired outcome. He actually calls his a desired effect, but it's the outcome or the effect of the teacher's action, what that would be. Next slide, please. Again, with standard A, as we continue to unpack it, this slide shows you examples of the indicators that we built. So we created indicators of teacher behavior, and this goes back to the 8 teacher behaviors that I showed you a few slides back. We created reflection questions that also stimulate growth and discussion, and we also created another desired outcome for each specific indicator, and finally, the evidences that can be observed, measured, or analyzed for effectiveness. This slide shows an example of a non-observable indicator. So the examples that you see, this indicator is focused on planning. So planning is a non-observable, a non-instructional strategy, but you would see artifacts of it and have discussions with the teacher about it. Next slide, please. This shows an example of observable evidences. The only difference between the observable and the non-observable indicators are that the observable indicators have evidences of not just the educator behaviors, but also examples of student behaviors that we would see occurring in the classroom upon using the cultural indicator. The desired outcome is when an observable behavior is directly affecting the students. So you'll notice in all the observable indicators that we've written, the desired outcome is always a focus on the student. What is the outcome on the student as far as that behavior is going? Next slide, please. If you'll remember, too, our State Department gave explicit guidance and direction that these would be not seen as standalone standards, but would be embedded and infused in current research models. So here's just an example. I know it's very small. It's a screenshot taken actually from the software that Learning Sciences International, who owns the Marzano model of evaluation license, calls iObservation. So this is a screenshot of iObservation, which is the software that manages and warehouses all of the observation data on a teacher. What I want to point out to you is that everything on this page is Marzano's model, with the exception of the white box near the bottom, and you'll see it says cultural evidence. Those are the cultural indicators that we had built through the project, and now we have them included directly into Marzano's model. So when an observer goes into a classroom to observe, they're not only observing research-based pedagogical practices, but they're now observing it and seeing it through a cultural lens. And so feedback for growth and improvement and measuring the teacher effectiveness of that strategy can now be seen through a cultural lens as well. We're probably going to be working with Learning Sciences International in the future. Now that we've done this for a year and it's been in field testing, we see some things that we want to have a little bit different. One thing, too, that I haven't spoken about is the rating scale for these. Again, since our partner was Bering Strait and they chose Marzano's model, his evaluation scale was the one to be used to determine effectiveness of these. However, we have created a generic performance scale that can be used by people who do not use any of these models, and the scale is built upon differentiating how the teacher is monitoring to see the desired outcome for these indicators with their students. Next slide, please. Our final piece, element 5 of the grant, is also now at the graphic designer and ready to publish within the next month. And it's actually a guide to districts on how to implement the cultural standards into their research-based model for professional growth and evaluation. Our guide will be interactive, it will be web-based, and it has many links to the National Implementation Research Network from the Franklin Porter Graham Child Development Institute from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and it is based on implementation science frameworks and promising practices. The premise of our guide is going to be a mathematical formula, and it's this: effective innovations multiplied by effective implementation multiplied by enabling contexts equals socially significant outcomes. And our goal is that our cultural standards will be producing socially significant outcomes and changes in the future of instruction in our state. You can also go to just Google National Implementation Research Network, and it will take you to a website that will give you more information. Next slide, please. So our next steps. I've been showing you a lot of icons and symbols that are particular to our place in Alaska, and this is my last one. If you swapped your eyes for an eagle's, you could see an ant crawling on the ground from the roof of a 10-story building. You could make out the expressions on basketball players' faces from the worst seats in the arena. It's all about the vision of an eagle and also where it soars high above. An eagle learns to soar by using thermal currents of air to help it rise. And these warm patterns are created by the surrounding terrain. Again, thinking of our place and where we've been, Project Create has created some warm thermal patterns in our terrain here in Alaska. And this is our next step on our journey. We have a vision like an eagle now that is built on the pattern of the warm thermal air of Project Create, that we're going to catch that thermal lift, and we want to begin to assess a bigger picture so we can start to see things now that we didn't see in our first grant. Next slide, please. So here's our vision. Our next grant is called Passages, Passages to Academic Success. Our thermal current of Project Create is lifting us now here. And our new grant is partnering with 8 school districts, with local Alaska Native community leaders, with Sea Alaska Heritage Institute, with Modern Teacher One and Teaching Channel to bring professional learning to teachers with a culturally proficient mindset. The purpose of Passages is to implement a program of professional development. So I was excited to hear about Wisconsin's journey that will help provide teachers with access to resources for building culturally responsive classrooms and instruction. This will be accomplished using a blended professional learning technology. We're going to digitize cultural resources for teachers and provide a video-based professional learning community that our educators in Alaska will be able to contribute to and learn from. I must also say that we're waiting to hear very impatiently right now as to whether or not we're going to receive an I-3 grant that we submitted. We should hear on that next month. And if we get it, our next grant will be to develop cultural standards for principal evaluation, and our partner will be Juneau School District. Next slide, please. This is a page of our soon-to-be-published document, again, showing an example of the standards here in Alaska that we're using for evaluation. It will be downloadable from a link on our website that I will show you soon. But our next goal is to build these standards into deliberate and intentional planning into instructional lessons in every classroom in Alaska, and also aligning with the core standards. Next slide, please. This is a brochure that we have developed to direct people to our website and to contact us for more information. And you'll see here that we are calling our website Culturally Proficient Schools. And I also want to take a moment to just direct people to Corwin Publishers, which is the publishing company that Debbie's book at the beginning is published from. And Corwin has an amazing set of resources about culturally proficient teaching and learning. Next slide, please. So this is our website, which is only about 2 weeks old. So at this point, I just want to have a disclaimer that it's very young in its infancy, but we will be continually updating it and populating it with new information and support for teachers, administrators, and districts. So please go there and subscribe. Then you can automatically receive updates as we upload new information. Last slide, please. So finally, I do want to say in another Alaska Native language, Alutiiq, I will say to you, Koyana, which is thank you, all of you for attending, and I hope this information has been helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry. So today you've heard a little bit about some definitions about culturally responsive standards-based teaching. You learned about professional development in Wisconsin, how one classroom teacher used it in Oregon, and about a teacher evaluation system in Alaska. We are so glad all of you folks could be here with us today. We just have a few minutes left for some question and answer portion of our webinar, and then we will get to the slide that has information for contacting Jerry and Michael. Were there any questions in the Q&A that we should get to, or on the Twitter? Okay, someone has their hand raised.
Yeah, it looks like Bart would like to ask a question over the phone, I'm guessing. So we can definitely unmute you.
That's great. Let's get to Bart.
Here, Bart, it looks like perhaps you're listening over your computer. If you'd like to ask a question, please type it in the chat panel or the Q&A, and we'd be happy to get to that.
Bart asked, he was wondering how impact is measured. Bart, are you asking about in culturally responsive teaching in general, or from one of our presenters more specifically? Okay. What is the impact on student outcomes? What we've been finding, Bart, is that with culturally responsive teaching in the classrooms, that they have better attendance because they are engaged more, their academic skills go up. They also become more engaged in more difficult and academically challenging courses. Michael, are you able to chat now as well? I was hoping Michael was back on. Oh, Michael?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you. Great. I was hoping you could tell him, too, some of the impacts you've seen in your classroom.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone really quickly, and, Jerry for being so thorough with the standards, and Debbie for articulating those things about culture. I know that to connect with what Debbie was saying, that we see a 73% attendance rate in Oregon, and we're convinced that with more culturally responsive teaching practices that more kids are going to attend school at a higher rate. and also become more involved in the school in empowerment groups, clubs, and even doing better on their tests. And I think the other way you can see it is you can see students who become engaged and they see educators who understand how to connect with them and to value their culture and voice, and you can see them become leaders. And what we've seen from our school, another thing that what Debbie mentioned, is that we have a higher rate of students than we've ever had from different backgrounds taking our international baccalaureate classes and then going out and starting different empowerment groups in colleges in the local area. So that's how we would measure the success of that.
Thank you. Bart continued that, are there any studies that describe the impact on student proficiency rates? What we'll do is we'll put a couple of those studies up on the REL website for you to be able to download and look at the impacts that they're finding from these studies. There are another couple questions that we had in our registration. Melissa from New York writes, I'd like to know how this relates to mainstream classroom teachers of ELLs. Michael, do you have a comment on that?
I think how it relates to mainstream teachers of ELL populations is one of the things that those students, as we know, struggle with in the very beginning is overcoming language barriers. So not only do you have to use PSYOP techniques and use cultural standards and vocabulary standards each day, but it's very important to value their culture and their place in the beginning. So much of Jerry's presentation, yes, it was about culturally responsive standards, but it was about the place of Alaska, honoring Native American past, and I believe that honoring those students' culture and ethnic backgrounds can really mobilize them and continue to have them succeed. And I would add even one more thing, that we've developed a program at Gresham High School where we have mentors that come back from college that were in our International Baccalaureate program and that come back from their senior year to work with our juniors, because as we become more diverse in our college classes and it helps our families attend college at a quicker rate, we have to also provide that support. So not only valuing where they come from, but then providing mentor support from upper-level students, because as we know, teachers and administrators, we're all fascinating, but the reality is when a student hears it from another student mentor, it's very powerful and inspiring for their success.
Thank you very much. We've also got another question in our Q&A. Jerry, are there any tools that show the alignment to the Danielson framework?
We have developed our own alignment to the Danielson framework, and if Bart would like to get in touch with me, I would gladly share that. We haven't specifically worked with a district that's doing Danielson yet, so one of my colleagues was actually in a district where Danielson was used, so she has more familiarity with it. I just have to say as a disclaimer, but because we were so entrenched in the Marzano framework that the alignment, I think, had a different depth or level of knowledge that we brought to it. So I would be glad to share what alignment we've created for the Danielson one, just letting people know that it's not, we didn't have that much direct experience, so it's just a cursory based on what we've read and looked at without having actually gone and trained teachers in that. Because I didn't mention, part of our work was that we actually became certified trainers of the Marzano framework. So in doing that, our knowledge level was much deeper.
Thank you very much. I've forwarded the slides to the contact information for Michael and Jerry. I think they'd be willing to share more information with you by email and that kind of thing. We have a couple other questions that we got on the registration form, but it's 2:30 now, so I'll send those out to our presenters and see if we can include that information on the chat, the edited chat that we use. Michael or Jerry, any last words before we hang up?
Just appreciate the honor of doing this and bringing what we've done to, the rest of the United States, and hope that it ignites a spark in other people, other places, and that they will feel empowered to do what we've done. And I think, as Michael said earlier in his presentation, he had mentors in his life early that instilled that, and I feel like the same thing happened to us, and that's what we want to become to others. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All righty. Thanks to both Michael and Jerry for your passion and expertise and time today, and thanks to all of you that joined us on the webinar. Remember, when we close out the webinar, that there will be an evaluation that pops up in your online window. Please fill that out for us. It helps us make each session better for you. And thanks again for joining us. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.